Welcome to the Bridge of Two podcast.
You have to have a certain type of person that gets that far, like flat Earth, round Earth.
I think there's just some things you just have to be like, no.
It's just like,
I'm just not, even if you can show me
right.
everything, even if you prove to me that reality isn't real.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Puddleglum.
It's kind of like Puddleglum.
Yeah.
I will live in a world, even if there is no round world. I will live as if there's a round world.
I will live as if there is a round world. Yeah. Because the alternative is the ice wall. And
yeah, it's like
that.
I can't.
Yeah.
No.
I can imagine a world that can lick your world hollow or whatever he says.
Yeah. Exactly. So anyway, okay, so we're back on the Bridge of Two podcast, and we had to bring in the secret weapon.
There you go.
Jonathan bleep. Oh. I just threw your name out there just so casually.
There you go. Dox me. I'm kidding.
I'll cut the last name out.
No, I don't care, man. It's
or I'll put a nice little bleep sound in there.
There you go. It's more accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, your name is.
Yeah.
That's what your name is. No, I'm just but yeah, so Jeremiah is moved up to North Carolina and he's got a busy week, and so we are taking the opportunity to bring John on and talk about something that is near and dear to my heart. The animated mini series, 10 episodes, 10 minutes each, Cartoon Network. What year was it? Do you know?
2014 or 13?
I think you're right.
13 or 14, yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I think you're right, because yep, November.
Didn't you just send me the thing about the 10-year anniversary?
Oh, yeah,
I think you texted
I'm
me
so
that
dumb. As I was about to...
Yeah, you don't remember every text you send all the time?
Well, no, I was about to actually talk about it's the 10th anniversary, so I could have just done the math immediately. You're like, oh yeah, 10-year anniversary, 2014. Yeah, the 10-year anniversary is coming up. I haven't even said what it's called. It's called Over the Garden Wall. Elijah Wood is the kind of lead voice actor. I don't know the name of the voice actor voicing Greg.
I don't either.
But he is magnificent. And sadly, can never voice the character again. Because he's not...
He got too old.
He's old now.
Yeah.
It's been 10 years. But we'll get into that later. There's also some other great cameos of different actors and things in there.
Oh, yeah. John Cleese.
Christopher Lloyd. I forget. I need to look up the name of the guy. Does a couple different voices, but he's I'm in Muppet Treasure Island.
Oh,
I forget the actor's name.
Well, Tim Curry's in it.
Tim Curry, yeah,
okay.
Tim Curry.
I'm not sure
if
I've seen the Muppet Treasure Island. Maybe we can do another episode.
We'll do that. That's next. That's the next one.
That's the next one.
The next one, Jeremiah isn't here, unless he really wants to be on Muppet Treasure Island.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're gonna get into that shortly. But first, we have our segment of talk about the sci-fi fantasy things we've been dabbling in lately.
Yeah.
So, in the last year, well, actually not year, it was 6 months. It wasn't April of this year, was it? Oh, it was more than a year, maybe.
What
was it?
Since
April when you were on last? You were on. It was in April, but I don't know if it was.
I think
April
it was 2023.
Year. So then it was over a year.
Yeah, I think it's been a while since then.
Jonathan is such a special guest that we can only have him on once a year, actually.
Yeah, that's special, in the way that people say it and it sounds like an insult.
Yeah, so what have you been doing this year that you want or recently?
Yeah,
that works too.
Not as much as I should, for sure. I feel like that was my answer.
Preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, right. One big thing though that I've really been enjoying the last 3 or 4 months, my wife and my sister-in-law and myself, we've been getting together and watching the Studio Ghibli movies.
Oh, that's great.
I've not seen most of those. I saw Spirited Away a few years ago. That was the only one that I had seen.
Okay.
And there's still some that are on the list that I haven't seen yet, but we've gone through some of the greats, and I'm really enjoying them. I'm not really a big fan of anime in general. That's not really my thing. I know.
Ooh,
maybe
Jeremiah,
I've just not
turn your ears off.
Yeah, seriously. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
1 year.
I'm sitting in his seat here.
Just once a year. That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So I don't know, but maybe I've just not been like brought into some of the better ones or whatever. But I've really been enjoying the Studio Ghibli. I think so far my favorite has been the one that I just saw last night, which was Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. From 1984, and the soundtrack to prove it. It's fantastic. It literally is just like synthesizer. Yeah, it's like if Depeche Mode made the soundtrack.
Yeah, soundtracks were much cheaper back then.
It really was. It was very cheap, but it's a great movie. Castle in the Sky is probably my next favorite one. Yeah, a lot of good ones. That's really been the only big thing sci-fi fantasy related recently, because just been
I think that's a great,
not in that headspace, I guess.
I think that's a great side of the sci-fi fantasy spectrum to lose yourself in, because Miyazaki,
Hayao Miyazaki.
Yeah, he just it's been iconic for his entire career, essentially. I have actually not seen hardly any of his films. I've seen pieces of some of them, I've definitely seen probably the most, other than his last one. I saw The Boy and the Heron in theaters.
So that's one that's still upcoming for me. So
I really enjoyed it a lot. I'd be just interested to hear, where you would put it, but it was just a fun and whimsical kind of story to just kind of get lost in, you know, no idea where it was going. I had no idea what to expect or sometimes what was happening even.
Yeah.
And but it was beautiful, and I love the soundtrack too.
Yeah.
But I have seen a good chunk of Valley of the Wind.
Oh, okay.
My grandpa recorded it on VHS.
Oh, that's different.
My grandpa's from Arkansas.
Or in the Japanese anime.
Well, I don't think he was. It's just like, to him, it didn't even register that was different than other animation.
Right.
He just saw this cartoon and was like, oh, maybe the kids will like this,
Right.
And so me and my cousin Ben watched a lot of that. I don't think we finished it, but we watched it on VHS back in the 90s, I guess, or maybe it was early 2000s.
Well, so there was actually so it was 1984 was when they released it the first time,
right?
In Japan. A little bit later, there were like 2 different English dubs, but then in 2005, Disney re-released it and recast the English voices. So one of the main guys is Patrick Stewart. You have to love his voice.
Okay.
I mean, he's fantastic.
I wonder if I heard it with his voice or not, because I just don't know if it was 2005 when I saw it.
Yeah. Well, so one of there's kind of like 2 main characters, a boy and a girl is usually in those movies.
Right.
And so the boy's voice actor for the 2005 redub is Shia LaBeouf. So that was like right after Holes. Like
Shia
where he's starting
LaBeouf,
to like,
actual cannibal?
LaBeouf. Yeah. He was like the weirdest meme probably coming up on like 10 years ago now.
And now he's as far as I know, a devout Catholic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it seemed like.
Yeah. Hopefully that sticks.
I'd like that to stick. Yeah. Stay being
not
that.
Much is stuck with him, but hopefully that sticks.
The bag on the head thing, he's replaced that now. He's got a hood and still looks good in brown. That's But yeah, so good movies. That's really been the main thing for my sci-fi fantasy.
Nice.
Let's see. I think my most controversial opinion about those so far has been that I didn't really care as much for Howl's Moving Castle. That was, I guess, like one of the most
It's
beloved.
a moving castle.
Well, it kind of is.
It moves.
I mean, it moves, but it's also not really a castle. Like, it's like this weird dilapidated house that has Billy Crystal Inside of
it identifies as a castle.
It identifies as a castle. Yeah, it does change. So, yeah, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't my favorite, but that was the one that I kept hearing hyped up as being like the best. But it just, dragged on a little too long. I feel like it was kind of full of itself. You know how sometimes you can watch a movie and you can tell that the creators of the movie really like what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they kind of are like stroking their own ego at that point, and like really kind of inflating themselves a little,
Right.
Yeah. That's kind of how it felt about 3/4 of the way through the movie, and it dragged on like 40 minutes longer than it should have.
Now I gotta watch this.
Yeah.
Now I gotta check this out.
Yeah. I don't know if that's heresy, but
it might be.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. I haven't seen it, so I can't tell you. I don't know I don't have my finger on the pulse of the Miyazaki fandom, but
yeah, my sister-in-law will probably kill me later for that one. But
okay.
She said she was going to listen to this, so that was just for you, Rebecca.
We just lost her.
Yeah.
So for me, what to share? Well, I've been reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets to my kids.
Nice.
And paying them for it. If I should put that out there.
Paying them for it?
Well,
You're bribing your children? With what?
No, they're earning it.
They're earning it. Oh, okay. I get you.
They're earning it.
I get you.
Is it the same thing?
I don't feel like it is. Yeah.
They'll give you money.
Are you actually giving them money?
Yeah. So
okay. I feel like your kids are still too young to really appreciate the value of money.
So they like to play Minecraft.
Oh.
And they want to buy things in Minecraft that are like skins, basically.
The expansion packs.
They want to buy things that they're gonna like not use for very long, and they have like birthday money and stuff, and I'm like,
yeah,
if you want to spend money on something like that, where it's like you're gonna just be flushing your money down the toilet, then I want you to work for it. And so they've been doing chores, and then I'm like, one other way you can earn money is let me read to you.
Well, why not?
And listen well. And yeah, and that's really my argument, because it helps me not feel like, I don't know, like it helps me let go of the need to feel like, oh, they really want this really bad, and they I'm just kind of forcing them, and there's like that the incentive of them knowing they're also like earning something at the same time,
like they have skin in the game. You're not just forcing them to read it.
Yes, that's helped me be able to be like, hey, let's go read, and kind of push them a little more. Whereas before, it's just like, if there's just the slightest lack of interest, then I'm just like, oh no, I'm not doing this. If you don't care about it, I'm not doing it.
I can understand that.
And so so I'm actually been happy with that, because we're on chapter 5, and it's been fun, and they are like listening. And
how do they like it? Do they talk about it?
They do like it. Yeah, they do like it. I mean, Ellie's always listened pretty well when I've read. It's Jack that's had more trouble, but he's done better, and he's older now than he was the last time we were trying to read it. So I can definitely tell that he's doing better. And I don't usually read like a whole chapter in one sitting with them. It'll be like about half a chapter. But yeah. So
did you read the previous books with them too? And that you're just on the.
So this is the second one,
right? So
we did read we started out. We were like, you can't watch the movie until we've read the book to you, And then I was like, I don't want to create resentment for the books in them, because they're like, I can't go on and read the next.
That's fair.
I can't go on and watch the next movie because I have to read the book, and then, So we read the first book. And then they watched the movie, and then we started reading the second book, and it was just so hard to get them to stick with it. And so we just
incentive helps.
Let it go.
Yeah.
So they've watched some of the other movies, but yeah. So I'm enjoying doing that. I hope to, maybe after this one, read The Hobbit or something like that. To maybe the first Narnia book or something like that.
Nice.
Always
good.
So that's been fun. And then I've been playing a game called God of War.
Okay, yeah. I'm somewhat familiar.
Okay,
yeah.
Now this game is not this is the more recent, they like rebooted kind of the series.
It's like with Norse myths.
Yeah,
or something.
he's like chosen to live as a mortal in like the Norse lands.
Got tired of Greece.
And yeah, he's trying to run from his past or whatever. And he's like married a mortal and has a son. And then like the game starts that she's died and they're going to go like take her ashes up on this mountain. Mm-hmm. And this whole thing kicks off, this whole story. It's a very, very, interesting and sort of a little bit of a trope, but like you've got the gruff, not great father figure. Doesn't really understand his son very well, and the son doesn't understand him because he's so reserved and things like that. And it's like about their relationship and like the son coming of age, like story for him, but then the father learning how to kind of become without the mother there, become some of that like maternal stuff that's needed. It's been a very, very, it's a very well done. I don't know where you stand on the video games as art debate, because that was a debate.
Yeah, I think they are.
That was a debate.
Or at least they can be. Maybe they're not
right,
always,
I think
but
they can be for sure. When you play a game like that, or some others I've played, where the story is just so well written, and it's, and it's just it's interesting when you can experience a story over that many hours in a visual way, but also in a little bit of a collaborative way where you're interacting, and it's kind of even more pulls you into the character's mindset and things like that. Anyway, so that's been a fun game, getting into the Norse mythology part of it. It's really fun. And then the story with just the characters in it is interesting.
I mean, I assume if it's anything like the original ones, he has to sort of take up his mantle and fight the Norse gods, just like he fought the Greek and Roman ones, right?
He's doing it more reluctantly, I think, this time. I think in the other games, he was far more bloodthirsty and...
Kratos is his name or something, right?
Yeah, Kratos, he's the god, like the Greek, the Spartan god of war or something like that.
Gotcha.
And I've never played any of those other games because they were like, I wasn't allowed to whenever they were big.
Yeah. Because
of the violence and, I think some other questionable content and things. This game is very violent, but it has a far different relationship with the violence, as opposed to, I think, the earlier ones maybe. So I've enjoyed it, and I'm getting really close to the end of it. But so that's it for me that I can think of at the moment.
Well, what's kind of cool, before you move on from that is you're talking about games as art and that sort of thing. You can really see the development of video games and the purpose, even in a series like God of War. Because when it came out, like you were saying, very gratuitous violence. It was like, you got the giant muscle-bound dude with the freakish sword, just killing people and cutting off heads and half-naked ladies and like all this kind of like just nonsense and stuff like that. Or just kind of gratuitousness, I guess you could just put it that way.
Right.
Because that's what all video games kind of at that time looked like. You had like Gears of War, which was kind of the same deal, just jacked up, 9-foot tall dudes that are like 300 pounds of muscle and big guns and, all this kind of stuff. But then it's like now, all these years later, you have this reboot and it's like more story driven. And there's like a family dynamic and it's a little bit more beautiful, like as far as the imagery in it and stuff from what I've seen, as opposed to just the kind of very standard, just kill everybody and,
Right.
It's interesting to see how games have become more story driven and more artistic as time has gone on.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that what people are trying to appeal to.
Right.
And I think they're just treating gamers more seriously.
Right.
Maybe than they used to. Even if gamers still gobbled up a lot of that stuff. I mean, I'll go gobble up a bag of chips if I'm, hungry, even though it's not good for me. So.
But we were all younger back then. That's the thing, is it's like we were all like teenagers. Right,
it's kind of growing up with us. It's
it's interesting.
We got to keep you on the hook with maybe some beauty instead of just the
the
garbage that you don't know better than to ingest.
It's like the pure, endorphin rush of chopping off something's head. That's all that you need when you're 15. When you're like
just the shock value
in the 30 era. Like when you're in your 30s or something.
Convincing yourself you could survive and these scenarios.
I mean, like, the zombie apocalypse was the thing that we all talked about back then, and it was like everyone that you ever met was convinced that they would be the hero, you know. And it's just, you have these fantasies when you're a teenage boy of like the zombie apocalypse goes down, and here's all the crazy weapons you can. You know,
kid in a candy store.
Exactly, you know, and then it's like you grow up and you kind of see, like you said, these games growing up with you. It's just kind of interesting to watch that.
Yeah. Well, the games, like, they kind of, the stories grow up because they what stories really do well is they can be metaphors for things you're actually living through and having to experience and cope with and grow from. And so the very extreme scenarios in God of War, you know, but then at the heart of it, you have this story of like understanding your son, son understanding the father. That's
almost like that's what the developers and the gamers are all kind of mutually experiencing. Exactly. It's like, how do I understand my family now? You know? Yeah.
Right. So.
It's neat.
But with that being said, ready to dive in or?
Yeah, let's do it.
How the gentle wind beckons through the leaves. It's beckoning us, John. It's beckoning us over the garden wall.
And this is like maybe fall for us. We don't get much fall, but
we get fall. It's just in the winter.
Yeah, there you go. It's in January.
Our fall is the winter.
Tomorrow, the high is 70 degrees.
I know. This week
Isn't that cool?
This week felt like the right week to talk about this because I was like, all the lows are in the 60s.
Yeah.
Which that's fall for us.
Yeah.
That's when we start doing fires.
Yeah. It might be winter for us too.
We start doing fires. Don't speak that evil.
Yeah, I know, right?
It'll get colder.
Yeah, rebuke that spirit.
Like mid 60s, it's like, we should probably start lighting fires in the backyard.
Yeah, flannel.
While we have a chance, yeah. Get like your pumpkin spice and everything. But yeah, Over the Garden Wall, I didn't know anything about it until a few years ago. I was watching, I think an author was talking about, I don't know if he's talking about animated shows or stories in general, and somehow in some list of talking about his favorite this or that, he mentioned this animated show, Over the Garden Wall. It was this thing. Elijah Wood was the voice, and I was like, huh. And it just, something about it, the way he described it, sounded really interesting. Probably just the brothers trying to survive lost in a forest, and it's episodic. It just sounded like something I would be interested in. And then when I looked into it, like the aesthetic of it, everything like really captured my attention. And then I at some point tried it out. I checked it out. I forget where I found it or how I watched it, and I was just like, this is amazing. This is so good, and on so many different levels. What was your were you introduced to it by
Deborah, by my wife?
Your wife,
so, yeah. She was given a like a little Over the Garden Wall DVD thing for a birthday present at one point, and I had never seen it before, never heard of it, and.
So she had heard of it when she got the gift?
Yeah, she already knew about it. She had seen it before. I think this was back when we were dating. I don't even think we were married yet. And yeah, so she got that, and so we started watching it that day. And very quickly, I just got hooked into it, you know. Like you mentioned, the aesthetics of it. I think that's the thing people remember the most, is just sort of the cozy feeling, you know, or the kind of hauntingly cozy. You could maybe like describe it that way.
It's on the edge of haunting.
It is.
It's on the edge of like, it's like the cozy Halloween vibes.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, not the
little spooky
slasher vibes.
Yeah,
you know,
little spooky, but you know, cozy. You feel like you could kind of curl up with a coffee and watch it or something. Yeah, you know, it's really nice.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So would you say this was like a litmus test for Deborah? Did you feel any kind of pressure?
Maybe,
You're like, oh, this seems pretty important to her.
See, I will admit, I am not a great person to introduce things to, because I just cannot turn off the critical side of my brain sometimes. So there's been plenty of times that people will be like, oh, you need to watch this movie. And I'm like, yeah, that movie was terrible. You know? And then later on, I feel bad and I have to go back and be like, here's what I meant. I meant it was terrible, but I didn't want you to know that. You know? No, but so I mean, maybe this is something of a litmus test, but I didn't even think about it because it was just really enjoyable to get into. And, you know, it starts off kind of casual, you know, the story almost seems kind of unconnected, right? You know, or each episode seems kind of unconnected to the bigger arc, except for a few minutes here and there. You know, so you can just kind of get into it and you start to appreciate the world that they're in, which we'll probably talk about that, but there's some interesting world building.
Definitely. I'm do you know what Reddit is?
Yeah. Okay. Social media.
I don't know why. This is like an old man thing to ask, probably.
You ever heard of Reddit, son?
Yeah. But I do talk to people that don't know what Reddit is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you know, I interact with people probably older than me or some. Maybe
I was gonna say, is that because like we're quote unquote old, or is it that I'm too young? You're asking me if I know.
It's just more of the fact that I don't know a lot of people that are on Reddit. Except
I'm not on it, but I read it occasionally.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Well, so I'm on. I'm subscribed to the Over the Garden Wall Reddit.
Nice.
So like at various points throughout the year, there's, you know, some thread that catches my eye and I go deep into the theories of the Over the Garden Wall and like and all of it. But before we go any further, we should say, if you haven't watched it and you're a person who enjoys things less when they're spoiled for you, don't keep listening.
Yeah.
If hearing of people talk about things they enjoy and sharing details about it actually encourages you to watch the thing and enjoy it more, then continue on with us. But don't want anyone to be like your only experience of Over the Garden Wall because you're like, well, I already know everything that happens.
No, because the experience of it is fun, and one of the neat things about the show is just that it's so interpretive. There's it shows a lot. It doesn't try to
it doesn't try to explain itself that much.
Right.
Which I think that helps the rewatchability of it.
Totally. Yeah.
And it enlarges the world. Like any world building, the more explained the world building is and things like that, you can have a better understanding of it, and that can be enjoyable, but it also makes it feel less, you feel less wonder.
Yeah.
But I guess what we'll try to do is just kind of give sort of a brief overview of each episode, not taking much time on like the actual events, unless we're talking about something related to it, and but then just kind of talk about what we like about it, what we see that's happening here that's interesting, that sort of thing. So if you'll come with us, we'll go into episode 1, which is called The Old Grist Mill, which we'll just say it sets the situation up very kind of vaguely. You know, it's just this weird looking boy with a gnome hat and a cape, and then a little brother that is wearing an upside down teapot on his head and suspenders.
Yeah.
Like, do you need to know anything else?
No,
I mean, watch the show.
Yeah. If that's not enough of a pitch, enough, I mean, come on. Yeah.
I don't know. Am I crazy?
Yeah.
Elijah Wood is voicing the main character Wirt, and then there's a young voice actor who's amazing voicing Greg. And the dynamic is just right away. Wirt realizes they're lost. Mm-hmm. And Greg is just this whimsical, happy all the time, seeing the bright side of things, and kind of getting into trouble, but you can't keep him down kind of character, and he's just fine. And he's also he's leaving a candy trail.
Right.
He has candy, unlimited supplies of candy.
Which will only make sense if you watch all the way through, what is it, episode 9 or something? 9 out of 10?
Yes, right. Yeah, the second to last episode.
Yeah.
What do you like right away in this episode, or what do you think this episode does really well?
Mm-hmm. Well, the way that the episode starts, like from the very beginning, is it gives you this kind of musical montage with these like different scenes kind of playing in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And the scenes don't really make any sense to you until you watch future episodes, and then you start to put it all together. And so that's just part of the way that the show is really good about drawing you in a little bit. And so it's like you just kind of happen upon these two boys who are walking through the woods, like Josh was saying, and there's no explanation for why they're there, and they don't realize why they're there. And it's like suddenly the older boy, Wirt is his name. I don't know why, but Wirt is his name. And he just like suddenly comes to while they're walking, and he's like, we're lost. And that's how the show starts. They're lost in these creepy, dark woods. So immediately, you've got the atmosphere. You've got the dynamic between the brothers, while the younger kid, Greg, is just kind of goofing off, talking about what he wants to name his pet frog. Mm-hmm. And the older boy is oblivious. Wirt, he's just oblivious the whole time until suddenly he just realizes that they're lost, and it's like they're deep in the woods. They don't know how to get out. They don't know where they are. They don't know why they're in the woods, and that's how the show starts. Right. So it's a great way to just lead you in.
Yeah, it does kind of give the it's kind of in media res for all the places we'll visit. Yeah, and all the characters we'll see. It kind of shows you really quickly in a very teasy way, and which is another one of those rewatchability aspects of
lots of Easter eggs in the show.
Lots of Easter eggs. But yeah, I think this episode hooked me so well because really I think Greg really the humor of the show really hooked me. Couple that with the performance of Christopher Lloyd's character, the woodsman that they meet shortly. Yeah. And there's this obvious, kind of ominous threat that's looming. He's a very serious character. He's got this serious job. He's warning them. Very good kind of mentor type character for them. And it sets up, it really, like, that the first episode sets up a lot of where things are going. They learn about the beast. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the woodsman kind of warns them.
Yeah, there's this thing called the beast that they have to watch out for, and the woodsman warns them. And the woodsman's got this lantern that he has to keep lit, which is a very important thing in the show. And then you've got the dynamic of Greg and Wirt, that the woodsman identifies that Wirt has this issue with taking responsibility,
right,
and blaming things on Greg, and Greg's got to name the frog.
Yes. Yeah.
That is.
Yeah. Which, what I like about that is that you go the entire series thinking that is the problem that Greg has to solve as a character, but at the very end, you realize that there's actually a deeper problem that he was keeping a secret that you got hints for the entire time.
Right.
And it's just, it's not anything like deep, really. It's just, casual vandalism you'd expect a, young kid to do. But, the frog dynamic thing, he's always changing the name of the frog every single episode because he can't find the perfect name, and so, it's funny. So the Wirt's got to take responsibility, and Greg's got to name a frog. Seems to be the dynamic, at first.
I cracked up so much, like I still do, when Greg is looking for the frog, and he's been laying out this candy trail, throwing candy everywhere, and he is in the barrel, and then you have beautiful eyes. Yeah. The giant monster wolf is like about to kill him. Yeah. And like the levity when there's this like horrifying thing, and then the levity at the same time is something the dynamic this show does in such a awesome way that makes you able to just,
right,
not let it become too dark and too depressing or too scary or whatever, because you've got that levity all the time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a thing the show does too, is with each episode is kind of, concerning situation, maybe terrifying, maybe scary, and it kind of like lightens at the end. So
yeah, it's a very tame show. As a whole, it's obviously it's a kids show. Right. It really is, and there's really only one scene I could think of, or one episode, which we'll get into, where I could say, okay, that's probably too scary for my kids, to watch. But other than that, the show is very, very tame and very light.
Yeah. I just love that Greg knocks the woodsman out too, like
through this complicated series of events,
Yeah, because Wirt was briefly talking about should we knock the guy out, and then he like backs off the idea, but then Greg just didn't listen, so he just goes through with it at the worst possible moment. When the wolf's attacking, he goes ahead and decides now's the time to knock the woodsman out.
My favorite scene in that episode, I think, is so you talked about the "you have beautiful eyes" thing. So he's like in the barrel and he's hearing the growling and the footsteps, and then the wolf appears with these glowing bloodshot eyes. It's like crazy looking image, and he's like, "Oh, you have beautiful eyes." Well, then it cuts to Wirt, who's inside the house, the woodsman's house, just kind of chilling out, unaware that all this is going on outside with his brother. Greg walks in, kind of like dazed, and he just goes,
"Hot dog.
Oh man, hot dog!" Yeah. And then he's like, "What's going on?" And then the door bursts open, and there's this horrifying wolf monster behind him. And it's that levity that's there, where it would be a terrifying scene, but all he has to say about it is, "Oh man, hot dog." It's hilarious.
Does Greg say, ain't that just the way in this episode? At the end? That becomes like a thing he says.
I don't remember in that
throughout the show.
Yeah.
I can't remember if he said it or not, but yeah, the wolf turns out that it like ate some black turtle,
right?
Because there was a piece of candy on the black turtle, and that's why the wolf.
Because dog that's what happens in.
That's what happens in The Unknown.
Yeah.
When you eat a black turtle.
Yeah.
But so they find out that wasn't the beast.
Right.
It's still out there. And then it goes on to the next episode, which it feels is pretty much disconnected, except an introduction to a new character.
Right.
So tell us about the next episode a little brief thing about it.
Yeah. So the next episode is probably what I would say seems to be the fan favorite episode because of the coziness and the aesthetic.
All the pumpkins.
Everything's very fall. Like, the leaves are all like orange and golden, and they really took their time animating it. There's this one sequence in the beginning where there's this kind of soft piano, sort of like falling piano noise while it has all this fall scenery. Very beautiful. And then a scene at the very end where there's kind of orchestral strings, just playing a very warm tune while this leaf just kind of falls to the ground and gets kind of caught in the crook of a fence. And so that's the kind of aesthetic we were talking about before. It's very cozy, very fall. So in this episode, they run into another main character, a small bluebird named Beatrice, who speaks with a girl's voice, who promises that she can get the boys back home as long as they follow her to somebody named Adelaide of the pasture.
The good woman of the pasture, whatever she says.
The good woman of the pasture. And so it's interesting because you don't really know her motivation. She kind of makes up these fake reasons to be around them. Like she tangles herself in a thorn bush, and when Greg lets her out, she's like, "Oh, I'm honor bound by the Bluebird Code to take you, to
Those
do
are the
you
Bluebird
a favor."
rules.
Yeah. Greg wants to become a magical tiger, but
it doesn't have to be magical.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't have to be magical. Yeah. So she's there. Her motivation is really vague, but she doesn't really seem like she's on their side in the beginning. She's trying to separate Greg and Wirt because Wirt is a little too stubborn and a little too smart to fall for what she's trying to do, but she can recognize that Greg is stubborn but is young and easily influenced. So she comes in, and let's see, they find a little town.
Because they're just trying to find a town, and they see a sign for Pottsfield, and so they head that direction.
Yeah, Pottsfield.
Which she doesn't want them to go. And when they get into the town, she's trying to convince them it's abandoned. But it turns out it's home to a bunch of dancing pumpkin people.
Yeah.
And they're really, kind of weirded out, and they're getting some bad vibes from them that, this might be a little... Culty. They're, like, doing this, like, I forget what you call it.
Like a barn dance.
Like a barn dancing around a thing. There's this giant pumpkin looming above them with a creepy grin. And then they say something about, like, leaving, and then the pumpkins get, like... Wait, what are you talking about? You can't leave Pottsfield or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they shut the door on them, and the giant pumpkin, like, comes to life, and I just love the dialogue there. Mm-hmm. Let me get this straight.
Yeah. Trample our crops.
Trample our crops.
Yeah. And
no, you want to leave.
Yeah. His voice is great too.
Yeah.
By the way. Like,
very well. They're doing stuff with his voices, like reverberations. It's feels very scary.
Yeah.
And then they're sentenced to a few hours of manual labor.
That's it. For their crimes.
That's a fun episode, and another example of how things just seem like they're getting really weird and creepy and bad, and then they kind of lighten at the end, and then they're even like digging what they think are their own graves at one point.
Yeah. And
it's just like skeletons that come to life and wear pumpkins. Yeah. Apparently.
Yeah, it's again, that's where the show gets kind of interpretive. It's like, what actually is going on in this episode? And so, clearly you can, they say that what happens is when certain people in certain conditions die, they end up in Pottsfield, and they put on their pumpkins in order to sort of, in order to move properly instead of just being skeletons or whatever.
Yeah.
And they just kind of join this little, what looks like a quaint New England farm town, and they celebrate around the pumpkin. What was his name? Like Enoch or something? Yeah, some biblical name.
Yeah.
and what does he say? Like he lets the boys go, and Beatrice
You'll join us eventually.
Yeah. He says that you'll join us eventually. And that makes sense of some earlier dialogue where they say things like, you boys don't look like you're ready to join us, and these kinds of things, because obviously they're not dead yet.
Right.
And it's just a really great, it's a classic example of what the show can do. It's beautiful. It's got the creepy factor, but then it's also got the levity. And it's just neat character dynamics.
That was Hard Times at the Huskin Bee.
That's right.
Which I don't know where if the Huskin Bee was that barn or what, why they were hard times. But so then the next episode, this is one of my favorite. I just not giggle, but almost giggle the whole episode.
Yeah.
Because it's so nonsensical. I mean, like, sure, pumpkins dancing around, but it's like
there's a theme.
There's a little bit of a theme there, and some themes and stuff, metaphors and things. This one is just nonsense, but it's amazing. It's so funny. So they find this. It starts off like this is like a thing throughout the episode that Wirt needs to try his shoe. He keeps trying to tie it, and he can't because Beatrice wants him to keep coming or whatever. So put a pin in that. Wirt hasn't tied his shoe. And then Greg isn't listening to Wirt, and he finds this like old 18th century school out in the middle of nowhere, but all the students are animals.
Right.
For some reason. Wirt and Beatrice are fighting about how Wirt's a pushover. Like, she's calling Wirt a pushover, and he just goes along with everything. So just to spite her, whenever he steps into the doorway of the school and the teacher tells him to have a seat because class is beginning, he's like, well, I guess I have to because I'm a pushover. I'm just going to listen to it.
Yeah.
So then Greg's outside with all the animal children that don't want to be a part of school.
Who still wear clothes.
The whole episode. Right. Yeah, they're wearing clothes. And and then he's inside, and it just makes no sense. And then she's singing this song the whole time.
I love it.
About
that's the funniest part.
Jimmy Brown, or is it Jimmy Brown?
Yeah.
Oh, Jimmy Brown, because like she's got like her betrothed or whatever just went off, and she hasn't seen him since.
Right.
Hasn't heard from him, and so literally the entire school like class lesson is singing the alphabet of all the ways Jimmy Brown has done it wrong.
Yeah, it's like an alphabet song that she's singing to him, because the show is a musical, more or less. Like there's musical numbers every episode.
Yeah.
And so she's singing this alphabet song where the line's like, A is for the apple that he gave to me, but I found a worm inside. B is for beloved, I called to him before he left my side, or something like that. It's this like lonely heart kind of song. And the funny thing is like at the very end of the song, you realize that the dude's only been gone for 8 days. Like that's it. It's like 8 are the days that you've been gone. Yada yada. And so she's just like this weird like lady with a broken heart. This Jimmy Brown's gone, and the school's about to be shut down because they can't afford to keep it open or something like that. Is the plot?
The plot is her father opened up a school to teach animals how to read and write as an investment opportunity. Like that's the story.
It's a great investment opportunity.
Like, he walks in his huge coat. Is this what I'm paying for? Yeah. And then you think he's being this like jerk, but then it turns out that he's had to sell everything. He's put everything into this project. And he steals, they like play this new musical number.
Yeah.
Where Greg, the little brother's singing about potatoes and molasses and how great they are.
Yeah. And
everybody's playing instruments, and then he takes all the instruments, but he's going to sell them to keep the school running.
Right.
And then Greg says, as soon as he falls asleep, let's steal his stuff. And they do.
Oh, and by the way, there's a wild gorilla on the loose that everyone's afraid of.
Yeah, that's mentioned, at the beginning, and about all the problems that they're having, and one of them is that there's a wild gorilla on the loose.
Yes.
And at one point, Greg and the other, kids outside are, it's chasing them, and they're fighting it and stuff. But yeah, so it turns out that Jimmy Brown is the gorilla, and he Wirt trips over his shoelaces and trips into the gorilla, and the head of the gorilla pops off, and it's Jimmy Brown in the suit, and he joined the circus to earn money to get an engagement ring or something.
Yeah.
And he got stuck in the suit.
Right. And everyone was too scared. He has his voice
everyone
was too doggone scared.
Yeah. Couldn't get the gosh darn head off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we learn that life really can be as sweet as potato and molasses.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the episode.
That's it. But you've got that episode is kind of developing a little bit of the tension and a little bit of relationship between Wirt and Beatrice.
Right.
Because they're kind of fighting and kind of having to get along or whatever, and that plays into the next episode, I believe. Or no. This next episode kind of brings us back a little bit to some things, reminds us of the kind of larger story.
Right. This is the tavern one, right?
Yes. Oh, This is such a great one too.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Songs of the Dark Lantern is what this one's called. So they find a tavern, and they're going to try to ask for directions to Adelaide's house. But Beatrice isn't allowed in because Bluebird's a bad luck for some reason. I don't know if that's really a thing, but the woman inside decides it is, and so Beatrice can't go in
inside. She's got this flapper accent. It sounds like Betty Boop or something.
Yeah, she looks like Betty Boop.
Yeah.
Greg keeps bringing food, plates.
Yeah.
Full of food to the table, and then every time that it cuts away, when he cuts back to him, the plates are empty. He's eating insane amounts of food
because the kids are able to die in the series, and starvation kind of starts to play into the story towards the end. So I think that detail about Greg talking about how hungry he is and then wanting to eat all this food and all this kind of stuff sort of establishes the fact that they like are vulnerable.
There's some real stakes.
Yeah, because towards the end, I mean, you have, I guess we'll get into it in a little bit, but you have a character that basically starts to die of natural causes, exposure, being in the woods. And so that's just an interesting little detail that I think that sets it up, is that, hey, these kids could actually starve if they don't eat. Which is not something that you see a lot in cartoons. You know, the main characters are pretty much like plot armor, invincible.
Well,
you know,
and that's the value of the way they did this as a limited series, so that it can have an established end,
right?
And you can, you can actually make establish real stakes, and instead of having it to kind of be like everything kind of resets every episode. You know, you have this story playing out over multiple episodes, and so yeah, I love how it all builds on itself. So inside the tavern, this is in the tavern, it's interesting because it's kind of like you said, the show don't tell. This is like the close one of the ways that they show, but they get close to telling,
right?
You know, because everyone in the tavern is obsessed with their identity in their like vocation, basically. You know, so she's like listing off all the different people.
That's the butcher, and that's the cobbler, and that's the
the toy maker, and or the tinker or whatever, and then there's one more though. Do you want to say it?
The highwayman.
I'm the highwayman.
Yeah, he's got this like, because they're in a tavern, and so they're like playing music and stuff, and they kind of all like, or at least most of them, sing a little number about their job.
Yeah,
and the highwayman is established early on as this character. Like when they're outside of the tavern, there's like rain and lightning, and this creepy looking figure is staring at them through the window, and it's the highwayman. And then later on he kind of interrupts, and he's like, I'm the highwayman. And he kind of speaks with this deep voice. He's like, I make money with my hands just like any man. And he sings like one line, and that's just like the entire song, and nobody's bothered, and that's the end of the character.
Actually, they all cheer.
Yeah, they're like,
at the end.
They're
like, yeah, it's like...
And he's like... I watched something that said he's supposed to be Cab Calloway, the singer from like the 1930s, which I did not know that, but like seeing the kind of the weird way he like moves his arms around and like sways and stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely something very stylistic happening.
Yeah,
when it's on him singing, because there's like it distorts a little bit, like almost like you're watching him in a funhouse mirror or something.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, but yeah, it's very. But it cracks me up just the way the show the way that it just does things. You know, it's just like he just interrupts them. He's the highwayman, blah blah blah. But it kind of establishes that what's important to these people is that you know what your role is, kind of. Yeah. I guess in society. Right. So they're all pressuring Wirt to
be the lover.
Well, at first they think he's a lover because he starts to talk about Adelaide. Yeah. And so they sing a whole number about this. It's so funny. Yeah. And everyone's getting in on it. And at one point, Beatrice is asking Greg, you know, how is it going, asking for directions? Him in the air, and Greg's like pretty good, and turns around and everyone's like throwing him in the air, singing this little ditty about his wedding day. Yeah.
But yeah. So then he finally interrupts all this, and he's like, "No, I'm asking for directions. I need to go somewhere." And so then they're like, "Oh, so you're the pilgrim instead?" And that's when it establishes that the woods that they're walking through themselves are actually very dangerous, and you know they admire him for being a pilgrim, like he's this brave individual. And then the tavern keeper, the Betty Boop lady, she starts to sing this number about them like watching out for the beast, and she says this interesting detail that he who bears the lantern is the beast. Yeah. And so the character that bears the lantern, at least in the beginning of the show, was the woodsman. Dun, dun, dun. And so there's this like tension there that it's like, oh, the woodsman must be the guy.
That's this like there's this specter of the beast, you know, looms over the show, and it's kind of like changing shapes of what you know of what the beast is or who the beast is, or because there's a beast. He sings like the four winds, and he and he takes the children. That's what the woodsman says in episode 1. Yeah. But then now you hear that the woodsman bears the lantern. So you're like, what is this? And you hear the singing off in the distance when Beatrice is out there.
Right.
And she thinks it's the woodsman, so she's going to go ask him for help or directions or something. And then simultaneously you're hearing this detail that all of a sudden makes you question things.
And she says something interesting where he, Wirt starts to defend the woodsman at first, and he's like, no, it can't be the woodsman. He was giving us directions to get out of this place. And she's like, and now you're more lost than ever. So it really kind of injects a little tension into the series for sure, and brings about an interesting dynamic.
Well, and it kind of establishes too that there's the people in the unknown. They don't have a great handle on what what's exactly what the nature of the world they're in is, especially the beast, and the threat that the beast presents to them. There's some missing knowledge there. So we get that other piece. I think this episode concludes with, it's Beatrice has gone over to see the woodsman, and we see that something happens to her. She gets knocked out or something. And then Wirt pretends he can ride the horse to go save her.
Yeah.
But she actually rides it. But
and he has a little moment of bravery.
He grabs a lantern too.
Yeah. Kicks it out of his hand or something like that, which I think sets the tree on fire.
Well, he grabs the lantern and takes it into the forest off the pole.
Right. Yeah.
So then he has a lantern, and he does. I think he blows a lantern out.
Yeah, it's the one that he grabs.
He
grabs
it. He blows his lantern out, and then I think the lantern the woodsman has lights the tree on fire that he was cutting down, which is like a terrifying looking tree.
Yeah, which we should probably establish that as a plot point too, because the woodsman, he's got this lantern, and he says his he calls it his torch to burn. It's something that he is forced to do or coerced to do in some way, where he has to grind up this specific kind of tree called an edelwood. Yeah. And that's the only oil that can keep the lantern lit. So that was established in the first episode. And you see him chopping up this edelwood tree. Beatrice is on the ground. You have the whole thing with Wirt where he actually shows a moment of bravery, as opposed to being the kind of cowardly teenager that he's been the whole time. And he's able to rescue Beatrice.
Do we see the beast talking to the woodsman in this episode?
You do. You see that vague silhouette of the beast for the first time at the end of the
antlers and okay.
Yeah, so he...
Oh, is that whenever he comes out and says we should talk, old man? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's when...
Because he's running out of oil.
Right. And so that's when you realize that that the plot twist that the tavern keeper threw out there, that the woodsman must be the beast, to Josh's point, that the characters don't actually know, much about the world that they're in, though that's also false. So you get kind of unreliable narrators here sort of guiding the story. So the woodsman is not the beast. And you hear this deep kind of sing-songy voice where he says, we need to talk. And the woodsman turns around and there's this strange silhouette with glowing eyes and antlers or something. It's hard to tell what he looks like,
Yeah, it's because you just see the silhouette, shadowy silhouette, and the haunting eye, glowing eyes. Then they go on to every time we see the next one, I'm so happy because every episode has its
we're only 5 episodes in. Or 4, right?
This will be the 5th one.
Yeah.
These episodes all just have their own things to enjoy about them.
So much.
Make them so different. So this next one is another kind of liminal. You've got episode 1 and 4 are important for the overarching story. And then the 5th episode is just another one of these fun detours.
Yeah.
I love how Greg they're in this guy's house, this kind of eccentric rich person's house that's owns a tea company or whatever, and they're pretending to be his nephews, and Greg keeps calling him Unky.
Yeah.
And it cracks me up so much, and I've started giving myself the name Unky.
There you go.
To Jeremiah's daughter.
Nice.
Like I'll talk to her and say, do you want Unky to hold you? And they're like, why are you saying that?
That's hilarious.
And it's because it cracks me up so much in this show. How Greg just plays right along.
Right.
Almost to the point that he isn't playing along. Mm-hmm. You know.
Because they need 2 coins, like 2 pennies.
2 cents. That's what the whole.
Yeah, they need 2 pennies. They have no money, so they decide to scam this rich, crazy guy for 2 pennies to ride on a ferry that they need to take. And before we get into the episode, like, shout out to John Cleese, okay? Yeah. Because this, like, veteran comedy actor just shows up in this Cartoon Network miniseries for 1 episode. And not even, like, a major overarching character. John Cleese.
But he just completely... He's completely... like owns, like he does, he kills it. Yeah, he does so well. He's so fun and hilarious in the episode. Makes the character come alive, really. There's so many just great lines in this. Like it doesn't push the story forward much, but like the chain of Beatrice talking about, I was thinking, we just outright steal from him.
Yeah.
And then, Wirt's like, well, what about, like the horse? He's a talking horse. He can speak for himself. Maybe what does he want to do? And the horse goes, I want to steal.
I want to steal. Like in this goofy voice. Yeah.
And then it's just them, like trying to see what stuff they can find and steal and stuff. It's
like, I'll be a good horse. I'll never steal again. I promise.
Yeah. My wife was cracking up at that. A lot in this episode. But yeah, this is another one where, there's like, he thinks there's a ghost in his house. Mm-hmm. So there's your little spooky kind of vibes. And he's maybe crazy. Yeah. Like maybe he did something.
Yeah, he might have killed somebody.
They keep they kind of push that needle a little bit, and then it just turns out for somehow that it's 2 really rich people's houses got so big that somehow they connected. I don't know how that happens.
They don't know how that happens.
The people working on the house were like, let's just connect these houses.
Right.
Not tell them. But, so then they like fall in love immediately. So, but the episode ends with it's a complete. There's no benefit from this episode really to the story, because Greg just throws the pennies in the fountain as soon as he gets them.
I can think of 2 things from the episode that are important. So one thing is the relationship between Beatrice and Greg, or Wirt.
Yeah,
Beatrice and Wirt gets better.
They're getting closer,
because they're kind of wandering around, getting lost in the house, and so she's asking him about his life, and they're kind of humanizing each other a little bit.
You get a little more information about him.
Right. There's a girl, as it always is. There is
his
a girl.
Big secret.
Yeah.
He has a crush on a girl.
Yeah. Poetry and clarinet. Remember, like he's like, I play clarinet and I whisper poetry at night to myself. Right. And she's like, that's completely normal. Well, the poetry thing is weird, but everything else is normal. Right. So that's important. And then one detail I didn't pick up until I watched a video of somebody explaining it. So Greg takes the 2 coins and he throws them into the fountain, and the camera just kind of watches the coins sink down into the kind of black water that is the fountain, and it's very reminiscent to what's going to be revealed about Wirt and Greg later on.
2 coins.
You got the 2 coins side by side, kind of drifting down into the black. They get eaten by a fish, but that's just a detail, whatever. And the fact that they need coins to get on a ferry, is kind of, if you have any kind of familiarity with mythology, it starts to lead you in the direction of where the story's going. But those are really the only 2 details I can think of that are interesting for the larger story. Other than that, I feel like they just they had an opportunity to work with John Cleese, and so they like worked him into the story somehow.
Right. Well, and the I guess with Beatrice, you get her a little bit more information about her. You know, you get the information that her family got turned into bluebirds because
she threw a rock at a bluebird. Yeah.
Which I still don't know. Like, is that really what happened, or what? That's a very interesting.
But it establishes that all these characters that are wandering through the unknown, that's what the woods are called, the unknown, they all have like a problem that they couldn't deal with or that they couldn't work out before they got there.
Right. So. And they're in this liminal space. She won't go home until she can figure out how to bring them back, and they're lost. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so the next episode is kind of it's very fitting, I think, episode for the like back half of the show because it's kind of where it's another very whimsical, upbeat, you know, pretty fun episode that leads into the next few episodes, which are a lot darker and kind of getting closer to the end of the deal. So this one's called Lullaby in Frogland, and this
probably my favorite episode, honestly. I love this one.
Tell me what you love about this episode.
Okay. Frog and Toad. Right? I mean, that's the entire episode is basically a reference or an homage to the old Frog and Toad Disney movies, you know, where the Toad gets in the frog in the car and you know, they're driving, and you know, and the old kind of classic Disney
anime.
I think it's beautiful. The artistic style, very much similar to the first or the second episode that we talked about with all the fall scenery. This one's a little interesting though, because most of the show looks like it's set in like a New England kind of area. This one is in this marshy kind of southern place. And so this is the ferry that they needed the coins to get onto. It's this ferry that is entirely populated by frogs, like anthropomorphic frogs. They dress up in like Victorian era, you know, fancy clothes, and they ride on this you know, ferry like that you might see going down the Erie Canal or, you know, the Mississippi River. It's like one of those, what do you call it, with the big wheel motor, you know, propulsion system.
Like a fan boat.
Kind of like a steamboat or something.
Yeah, it's steam powered, I think. Yeah.
And so it's just got this very vintage, deliberately dated kind of look to the episode, and it's warm. You know, I mean, the last couple of minutes, it's got, you know, kind of a spooky twist, whatever. But most of the episode is just warm, and it just makes me happy.
I love how the frog size, like the size of Greg's frog, is just completely
different,
like thrown out the window. Like in earlier episodes, it's smaller than him,
right?
Small enough to fit in his like shirt,
right?
And then all of a sudden in this episode, it's the same height as him,
right?
You know, like it's because they're all of a sudden it's like they're in this anthropomorphic frog area, so it has to be bigger or whatever. It just cracks me up,
right?
Not as like a continuity thing at all. Like
no.
I don't think it's a continuity thing. I think it's just the frog is kind of has this little journey it's going on, right? to get a record deal,
right? To get a record deal, exactly. The frog.
Yeah, I love how it builds to the musical piece too.
Yeah,
I love the musical. I love the voice of the frog singing.
Yeah, and
it's just a very beautiful song, and you get to see Wirt playing the bassoon, and Greg as a drum.
Yeah. Drum
His
me
eyes
in the face.
just pop through the drum somehow.
Right.
Drum me in the face. Yeah. I love the tadpoles. Keep tripping on the tadpoles, and the flies that the frogs just eat that get thrown into the air.
Yeah. So the plot is basically that Greg stupidly threw the pennies into the fountain in the last episode. Right. But they need to get on the ferry in order to get to Adelaide's house. And so they just sneak on anyway. And so the entire time they're trying to avoid this like security guard who's running around with a bobby stick.
And a whistle.
Yeah, and a whistle, right? On this, the security guard is a frog. Everyone's a frog.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so the entire episode is just them avoiding the security guard up until the last couple of minutes.
Right.
And the way that they avoid the security guard in the end, they kind of overcome that problem, is that Wirt learns to play the bassoon, and the frog sings, and he has this beautiful baritone kind of voice, you know. Yeah. It's like,
and they love they love the bassoon.
Yes, they love.
It's very important. Like the frogs start freaking out when the bassoon player gets knocked in the water.
Right. That was the greatest. Yeah. For some reason, you know, it's like, what instrument would a frog like? A bassoon, I guess.
Like they're in a disguise. Like they're in the disguise thing where, you know, Wirt's in the coat and the frog's on his head, but the frog's head is sticking out of the coat, and so they think it's a frog, even though the bassoon is being played from within the coat. But
logic.
As soon as the coat drops, he just keeps playing the bassoon, and the frog keeps singing, and so nobody cares.
Okay. Yeah. That's all they cared about.
Actually, the frogs actually start like shushing the police. They're like, shush, let them finish the song. Yeah.
And the frogs, like, none of the frogs speak English.
No,
they all just kind of they just kind of grunt and ribbit and stuff like that. They croak, and then except for Greg's frog, who just suddenly sings in English and then never does it again. You know, it's like, why not? So then they arrive, and the frogs start hibernating. As soon as the ferry docks, they all jump into the mud and they start hibernating, which.
The season's changing.
Right. Gives you the indication of how time is passing there. Yeah. Fall is turning into winter. And that's when the story gets a little crazy.
Colder.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's the very end of the episode. Yeah. It's the very end of the episode where they do actually make it to Adelaide's house, because Beatrice leaves them because she's started to, you can tell in this episode she's very torn, because she clearly it's kind of like at this point you kind of can put the pieces together a little bit, that there's maybe something bad would happen if she brought them to Adelaide, because she's like leaving these little hints and stuff. And Wirt is so upbeat in this episode, and Beatrice is so down that you're like,
what's going on? Yeah.
You're like, Wirt's got a hit coming. Yeah. You know, to his sunny disposition. So yeah, whenever they realize that she's left, they hurry to Adelaide's. Before they reach there, you get to see that Beatrice has made this agreement with this woman named Adelaide that is, can't stand the night air, and needs a big strong child servant.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And fill their heads with wool and all these things.
That's the creepiest part.
That part's definitely creepy.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny. It's also weird. It's also creepy.
Yeah.
But, she's got these like yarn things throughout the house, and as soon as Greg and Wirt run in, she pulls on them, and they just like ties them up.
Right. She's like some kind of a witch.
Yeah.
Is kind of her character, and and so
she looks like a witch. She's got the weird face and the hat. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting twist that the main character that you thought was going to, help the boys get back home, turns out that Beatrice was actually, made a deal with her that she would bring them a child, because Adelaide of the pasture was the one that turned her into a blue jay. And Adelaide has a sort of magic pair of scissors that can cut the wings off and turn Beatrice back into being a girl. So they kind of all have their reasons for being there. Beatrice wants to be a girl again, so she initially offered to bring a single child to Adelaide, which is why she was trying to separate Greg and Wirt in the second episode. She finally gets, she finally grows accustomed and appreciates the two boys, realizes that she has this moment where she can't turn them in, and so she actually tries to turn herself in to become the servant. But the boys don't understand this, so you have the tension there, because they didn't hear Beatrice say that she was gonna sacrifice herself, and so Wirt realizes that Beatrice was leading them astray the whole time and was just trying to selfishly, get her old life back and everything. Yeah. They very quickly kill Adelaide by making her breathe in the night air.
Who opened the window? Was it Beatrice?
Beatrice did.
Yeah, I thought Beatrice did. Yeah.
And then the boys escape using the scissors. You'll find out later. They use the scissors to cut themselves free, and they manage to get out when she dies. Mm. But now they're separated. Beatrice is guilty and feels bad. The boys are on their own. They have nobody to lead them anywhere. They have nowhere to go because their one lead on getting home.
Yeah, that was where they were trying. That was the only hope they had.
Yeah.
You also learn before Adelaide dies that she's doing as the Beast commands. The Beast has told her to get a child. I don't know exactly how that all connects it, because she wanted a child, but the Beast was commanding her. So maybe the Beast, similar to what we'll see later, was telling her that she needed to do something that would serve him.
Yeah.
But she's like you've said, there's this theme of the people that are there that are unable to deal with a problem themselves, and she's definitely a person who doesn't want to deal with problems herself or whatever. She wants to be waited on by a child. And it seems like certain characters just have opened themselves up to the Beast influence, because of their unwillingness,
like the Woodsman.
Yeah, either unwillingness to try and get over things themselves, or just because they have a problem that opens them up, where the Beast can kind of present a solution. But yeah, so the next episode 7, this is the creepiest one.
Yeah.
This is the one where I'm like, I don't know if I can show the kids this.
Yeah, not that episode, probably.
This is called The Ringing of the Bell. And you think in this episode that the creepiest thing you're going to see is Auntie Whispers.
Right.
But it's not. But yeah, so the boys, I think I was laughing last night watching it because Greg is starting to say something like they're like looking.
Don't go to the really creepy abandoned.
Greg's like, oh, let's not go to that really creepy, and then Wirt's like, shh, and then he's like, oh, it's perfect, and they go to the house, and great line in this episode, because Greg looks in there's this barrel in this house that they think's abandoned that also has a fire going. And then it's a bunch of those black turtles that one was eaten by the dog in the first episode, are in this barrel, and Greg freaks out and he's like, we're rich, we're turtle rich.
Yeah.
And then whenever this maiden comes out and she's wondering who's there or what they're doing there, Greg says, we're gonna burgle your turts.
Yeah. We're here to burgle your turts. Yeah,
we're burglars. Yeah, so,
and she's sick.
She's sick.
The
she's
girl
coughing.
What's her name? Lorna. Right? Yeah, Lorna's sick. She's coughing and sniffling, and she is like really ghostly pale, and odd looking and stuff. And in the course of the conversation with Wirt, you kind of get the sense that Lorna is being controlled by Auntie Whispers. Yeah. And she's this kind of figure where she, it sounds one way and it ends up being another. It sounds like Lorna is being abused and manipulated by this Auntie Whispers. She's like, oh, she doesn't let me have friends because they'll make me wicked, and I can't do anything without working because working keeps the wickedness away. And it sounds like this culty kind of weird thing.
Well, Auntie Whispers looks terrifying.
Right, that's the thing. She comes in.
She comes in. She's this giant head, very pale as Lorna, but her eyes are like messed up.
Right, like yellowish. Like,
and the pupils are like not round.
Right.
They're long and they're like kind of. They're not solid either. Like the eyes.
She's got this hunchback that makes it look like she's crawling on all fours.
Her teeth are black and broken, and she while the boys are hiding in where the turtles are, she reaches in, grabs a turtle, and just eats it like it's a clam.
Yeah,
like she spits it out. It's just a shell.
Right.
So yeah, lots of red flags.
And she has that bell.
Yeah, and she's coming and she's controlling her with this bell, and so it's like, and so Wirt is just like, she's so bad, like you need to get out of here, and convinces her that they can help her with the chores while the Auntie Whispers goes upstairs to sleep. If they can help her with the chores, maybe they can sneak out. Mm. And there's a little bit of a like a almost blooming romance type thing happens. There's this pretty little song that Elijah Wood's voice, who would have thought, so beautiful. Frodo himself.
Yeah.
And
another person on the journey there.
Now, isn't Lorna? I feel like Lorna's voiced by someone.
Well, I know Auntie Whispers is Tim Curry.
Yes.
Yeah, which is funny. He's a great actor in general. He's a great voice actor too. I don't know about Lorna's voice though, to be honest.
I thought I had seen it. Like, this was not recent. I had looked it up, and then I thought about it the other day, and I forgot to check. Have you seen A Knight's Tale?
I haven't. I know it's a Heath Ledger movie, right? So is she in that one?
Strike one.
Yeah, right.
It's a good movie, I think. That'd be interesering to see.
Yeah. What other Heath Ledger movies do you like?
I don't have a whole lot more that I've seen, but careful. I gotta be careful.
Yeah, right.
No, there's a character, the love interest in the movie A Knight's Tale.
Okay,
it's the same person. Her. So I saw that was just like a random thing that I saw. I was like, she's in Over the Garden Wall.
Nice.
At one point, but yeah. So Jocelyn, if you're listening, Jocelyn is Lorna, in Over the Garden Wall. But yeah, so whenever Greg's following the frog up the stairs and wakes up Auntie Whispers, and Auntie Whispers comes down and is like kind of, blustering about, what are you doing here? And so they go and sneak, including Lorna, all of them run into this cupboard or pantry or whatever, where there's barely any light. And the things that Auntie Whisper starts saying, they're like, wait, what? What is she saying?
She'll gobble you up.
She'll gobble you up. She's gonna eat you or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean she'll? And then immediately, this horrifying, ghostly, demonic-looking figure just floats up above them and says something about my turtles.
Yeah, because that's what she called them.
Calls them my turtles.
Turtle thing.
So it turns out, apparently, Auntie Whispers is the good guy, and she really was like trying to keep the wicked things from taking her over.
Yeah, because that's what was making Lorna sick, was the fact that she's possessed by this thing, and that's what she meant by getting wicked. She didn't mean like, oh, they're gonna make you sinful if you have friends. It meant that if there were going to be friends around her, she would, be possessed by this thing and then literally murder them and eat them. Was what she was trying to keep her from doing that with the bell.
Right. Well, and if you go back and rewatch, and you see the beginning, at the very beginning, whenever there's the little montage, you see Lorna in this room, and there's tons of bones.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Lining the room.
In episode 1.
She's like sweeping it in episode 1 at the very beginning. And so she's, a lot of people have been killed by Lorna,
apparently,
unfortunately. But in true Over the Garden Wall fashion, the levity quickly turns lightened by Greg, having an idea, we're diving out the window, and then Greg realizes that the bell was eaten by the frog.
Right.
And so he starts shaking the frog, and he's gonna do the
He rings the bell that way. Yeah.
And he's gonna say, "Turn her into a magical tiger."
That's right. Yeah. No.
That's how Wirt takes it.
Yeah.
And he does the thing that why didn't Anti-Whispers try this?
Who knows?
But he says, rings the bell, which commands the spirit to basically be banished.
And Lorna's
Lorna's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, you have that like moment where the like light is coming out of her, and this like demonic like skull thing like comes up and like disappears. And, in like this exorcism, it's pretty kind of creepy. Like that's the one episode that I feel like keeps it from being completely a young kids show.
Right.
You know, is that one.
Yeah, there's something about the animation. There's just a different place the animation can go.
Right.
When it comes to the unsettling things, that if it looks realistic, it can be unsettling, it can be scary, but at the same time it feels more grounded.
Right.
When there's a realism to it, that whenever you have the animated quality of something, that it can be so much more twisted and things like that. So
and then you learn that Anti-Whispers is Adelaide's sister.
She gives a very unhelpful warning.
Yeah. Oh yeah, don't talk to my sister.
She can't be trusted.
But it kind of makes you wonder what her actual motivations are, because she's got a child servant in her house. Right?
Yeah, maybe Adelaide was jealous of Anti-Whispers, like, hey, she's got a child servant. But yeah, it is too, because like you find out that, oh, she's not my actual aunt.
Right.
Earlier on.
So who is this person?
So it's
and she clearly could use magic.
So there still could have been some you could say could be some manipulation happening from Anti-Whispers, that now Lorna has the Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, where it's like, you're my family.
Yeah.
Okay.
What happens at the very end?
So at the very end, and I think the blow, Wirt they had just left, Wirt had just was at the low of Beatrice betraying them, and we don't really know where we're going. And then he has this kind of upswing of, with Lorna, there's some feelings a little bit happening, and he's helping her out, and she decides to stay with Anti-Whispers. So whenever they leave, Wirt's just really down, losing hope. And the Beast is watching from afar, and he said, yes, all hope will soon be lost.
Oh, right. And
it
starts to get really cold.
It starts to get colder. The wind's blowing. And, and that's something that the rewatching and the later episodes becomes clear, that the more you lose hope of getting out of the woods or whatever, the more in the power of the Beast you become. Right. That's where the woodsman is, and that's where things are heading for our heroes. So talk to me about this this fish on the boat.
I don't know.
It's a fisher.
Well, obviously.
It's a fish that's a fisher.
Right.
On a boat. And
he catches something in that beginning montage.
It cracks me up.
He appears in that little musical montage.
He's got a fishing pole.
And he catches something on the end of it. I don't remember if it's another fish or what.
I don't remember either.
So the fish is in a boat.
Yeah.
Fishing.
Yeah. But that's
it.
And it ferries them across, Wirt and Greg.
Right.
And you can hear the Beast singing in the background. And Wirt says, can we stop pretending we're ever going to get out of here?
Oh, yeah.
He's basically lost all hope. They're tired. They're cold. They're hungry. It's winter it's very snowy. And then they just lay down and go to sleep. Shouldn't do. If it's cold out, you're outside in the elements.
Yep.
You will die. And then tell me about this. What happens next? What happens next? I'm not sure.
Okay,
I'm sure I've seen it, but I don't know what's happening.
Is this the next episode then with
Babes
Greg
in the Wood?
Stream?
Yeah, we're Babes in the Wood now.
Okay, so yeah, it's an episode called Babes in the Wood. I don't understand this episode very much, to be honest. I don't think anybody really does. It's a reference to a very old animated movie called Babes in the Wood, which has a little song, which itself is actually based on an old folklore thing. So there's like layers of connections and references there. From what I remember, whenever I was trying to read and figure out what this episode was about, the original Babes in the Wood folklore thing was it was a story about two children who get lost and their bodies are found in the woods.
Yep.
So that's that connection.
Yeah.
It's all animated in this very corny, very like 1940s style of animation, just like the Babes in the Wood episode or movie. It's all musical. It's all really goofy. And
it's all appears to be like a dream. Like Greg,
yes.
They both fall asleep, and Greg, is like transitions from being asleep and gets brought up into this
raptured.
Raptured, haprazzo.
Yeah.
Snatched up into Cloud City.
Yeah.
And that's where all this crazy stuff is happening. The different welcoming committees and
it's because before Wirt passes out, he's about ready to. He's giving up hope. He's almost lost his hope, as the Beast said. Wirt says something like, "You can do whatever you want. I don't care." To Greg, when Greg is asking like, "Can we go do something?" Wirt's like, "Do whatever you want. I don't care." So Wirt is not taking care of his brother at this point. This is kind of his rock bottom, as it were. He's brokenhearted and he's not taking care of his brother. So Greg takes that and goes, "Oh man, I have so much power. I can do whatever I want." And he has this dream where he's talking to all these animals and they're all singing and it's all nice and fine is literally the song. Like everything is nice and fine all the time.
Yeah.
And then it gets interrupted by this like weird scene where the old north wind breaks in. It's just like the storm cloud that chases them around. And Greg defeats him.
It's kind of Greg's fault that it breaks in, is what I saw. Like he in the festivities, he like bounces into the gate and the gate opens up. And they're like, "Oh no!"
Yeah, the wind gets in, so it's Greg's fault.
So I almost like took it as some of it's like Greg blaming himself. Because Wirt has been putting a lot of blame on himself, and we learn also later that he has some guilt about something as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting because it's what's the North Wind represent, and how much of it I feel like at a certain point I start to after he wakes up I question how much of this was from the Beast,
right? How
much of this was there any kind of almost angelic bargain made, not even like was the Beast a part of that, or was like whenever the angel appears and basically says your brother's being taken, and then Greg says has this idea and whispers, and then the next thing when they wake up the Beast is talking about the agreement they made, and so I'm like, was he in his dream making an agreement with the Beast?
Yeah. That's how I took it. Or
did he make that bargain? Like, did he tell the angel that and then go, and the Beast was there? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I interpreted it as being that, so after he defeats the North Wind, this angelic figure comes down and is like, "I will grant you whatever you want," yada, yada, yada. And she's trying to convince him to leave Wirt behind, because Wirt is freezing, and you start to notice branches are growing around his body, kind of closing in on him, as it were. And that starts to make sense in a little bit. And she says the Edelwoods are already claiming him, which is those are the trees that the woodsman has to grind up in order to keep the lantern lit. And I don't remember exactly what was said, but I remember that Greg says, "Okay, I can do anything. Then I know what I have to do." And he whispers something to the queen, and then immediately he's seen kind of walking after the Beast. He wakes up, and he says, "Hey, I'm so sorry I got us all into this mess," sort of heaping the blame that Wirt has been giving him the whole series on himself. And now he's like, "Well, I guess it's my job to fix it." And so he starts going after the Beast, and it's clear that he's trying to make a deal with the Beast to maybe get them back home and save Wirt.
Yeah,
or something.
like that. Yeah.
And so you start to notice that the responsibility dynamics are wrong. The older brother, Wirt, should be the one that's taking care of Greg, but Wirt is more interested in blaming Greg, and Greg seems to be internalizing this and feeling like he's messing everything up for some reason. That gets revealed a little bit later,
Right.
So Greg is now following the beast after his dream. Wirt Wirt
wakes up and realizes he's gone, and he starts to chase, and he falls through the ice.
Yes, into the water.
The water, which they also, is another foreshadowing of a reveal. But he's all, just to mention again, the fish.
Yeah.
The fish pulls him out in the net.
Right.
It just cracks me up so much that he gets pulled out by the fish.
Right.
In the fish net.
For some reason.
So this next episode is called Into the Unknown, where we learn a lot of things in this episode. Let's try to just talk about what we learn about kind of the things that we've seen, the things that have been hinted at, and how they actually get into the unknown and everything. And then just to get to episode 10 a little quicker. What do we learn in this episode?
Well, we learn that it's Halloween. That's why Greg had candy in his pants that he was making the candy trail with in the first episode. We learn that
that's why they're dressed oddly.
Yeah, so he was trying to be like a gnome, or something. Thing. He's trying to woo this girl that he talked to Beatrice about, because it takes place in their real world.
Right.
The regular human world before they've gone into the woods. And
I'm thinking 90s maybe?
It looks like it. 80s, 90s, something.
Yeah.
There's cassettes and things like that. So yeah, I mean, you learn about the dynamics between Greg and Wirt before they showed up in the woods, that they didn't really like each other because of a marriage thing.
Yeah, Greg is a step brother.
Right.
And that happened, that after his parents got married, the parents got remarried, they had him, so yeah, there's some feelings there.
Yeah, some kind of, and maybe, their dad is a little pushy on Wirt, because he's like, oh, you and your stupid dad are always trying to push me to do this and push me to do that, and he's not willing to take any responsibility. He's not willing to own up. He blames Greg for everything that goes wrong, even when it's his own dumb decisions. And he's really insecure and really just kind of a sniveling teenager, sort of, who's just sort of feeling sorry for himself and limping around. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you learn.
Well, you learn, you get to see where Greg gets the rock.
Yes.
And, well, actually, I don't know if it actually... Yeah, he says he found the rock in her...
Well, he says that she gave it
to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he gets the rock. So that's where he got the rock. And you... Basically, the whole reason they get into the unknown is because... they are... Well, Greg's looking for a frog.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that goes. So Greg's looking for a frog. Wirt's... But they're also trying to get this tape back from... the person that Wirt has a crush on, because it got given to her, and in the course of running away from a police officer that's teasing people, pretending he's arresting them when he's not.
Just kidding.
I'm just kidding. Happy Halloween.
Yeah.
They climb up this wall, over the garden wall. They climb up the wall, and they jump over the other side, and they land on train tracks.
Right.
And whenever they are arguing for a second, they look up and see a train coming, so they jump out of the way, they roll, and they fall into the water. And so that is how they get into the unknown.
Yeah, they black out and sink. Which you learn that in the title, the garden wall, the garden is a cemetery. It's not like a flower garden or anything like that. It's a cemetery. That's where they where they climbed the wall to try and run away from the cop. Fall over, train almost runs over them, and end up in the water blacking out, where they presumably then go into the unknown.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
neat.
Which is it's interesting. because it's just raising more questions about where is the unknown, what is the nature of what they're experiencing, you know.
And the song, they're, you know, as they are escaping from the train, rolling down into the water, there's this like old sounding kind of country folky song, you know, about the long black train, which if you listen to the lyrics, it's obviously about dying. And so you come to find out that Greg and Wirt are sort of in this in-between stage where they're almost dead, but they're not quite dead yet because of the injury that they took falling away from the train.
Right.
You know, so it's just neat.
Right. And then I think the episode ends with Wirt waking up. And he's with Beatrice's family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she somehow got him there.
Yeah.
Somehow she left him on the doorstep of her family. The blue bird.
The tiny little bird.
Maybe she had the fish pull him.
Yeah.
But so he heads off into the snowstorm to look for his brother. So he's kind of been shocked out of his despair and his hopelessness, or whatever it is. You know, he may not be very hopeful, but he's done giving up at this point. You know, so
and he wants to care for his brother.
Right.
Finally, realizing that it was kind of more or less his fault that they're ending up where they are.
Right.
You know.
So what do you think about what's happening in so the next episode is called The Unknown, the final episode 10. What is the Beast having Greg do? Why?
Yeah, he's doing these mindless tasks.
Why is he having him do all that?
So my understanding of it is that Greg is too optimistic and too sunny.
He's trying to make him more hopeless.
Well, so I think, and this is just my understanding of it, is I think that the Beast realizes he cannot break Greg's will, which is how he normally likes to kill his victims, by turning them into the Edelwood trees when they get depressed. And he's actually just trying to straight up kill him by exposure. And so he's keeping him in the snow, and he's like, all you got to do is wait for the sun to go down into the cup, which obviously will bring freezing temperatures. And, you know, Greg is over here, he's like shaking his hands and, you know, wringing his hands, and he's like, you can see his breath, his eyes are like sunken and stuff because he's freezing. Yeah. You know, and he's starving, as they established earlier on in the series. And so I think the Beast is just straight up trying to kill him by exposure, which, you know, was what was foreshadowed by Greg talking about how hungry he was, and what I was talking about, where the characters have actual stakes. Like, they will die if they're outside too long. Right. So I think that's what that's my understanding is the Beast was promising Greg in his dream that he was going to get out if he completed these challenges, but really the Beast is just trying to get him to stay out long enough for him to die. Right. And Beatrice sees this is happening, and while she's seeing what's happening, she gets blown by a hard wind and crashes into Wirt, so that she can get Wirt's attention. Blown by an old north wind. A north wind, yeah. And then the woodsman finds Greg. This is like a horrifying kind of revelation for him. Mm-hmm. Where it's revealed that, you know, the Edelwood trees, because Greg is like part tree, kind of like the trees kind of growing up around him, and the Beast says that I've got another Edelwood tree that you can use for lanterns soon, and the woodsman realizes that all the Edelwood trees he's been chopping up and turning into fuel have been people that the Beast has, you know, turned into Edelwood trees. Why they look so freaky. Yeah. I mean, they literally like have faces. People. It's kind of like, you know, he should have known that. Yeah, it's like, yeah, something bad. I didn't know. It's like, are you sure? Oh, there's a new tree here. I don't know how it happened. Yeah, I just love this episode. I love this confrontation. The music is really intense here. The stakes are so high because Greg is, you know, Greg really is the heart of the show. Yeah. So to see him in that state is super harrowing, and it really affects Wirt when he sees him
in that state. You have the woodsman and the beast engaged in this little fight happening, which is really cool. The woodsman's just a cool character.
Yeah.
And seeing him try to take on the beast is moving, even though he isn't physically strong enough to defeat him. You know?
Right.
Any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I just let's see. It's the point where Wirt's character arc kind of reaches its zenith here. Greg says, "I'm so sorry. It's my fault. I keep messing up, and that's why I'm here." And so Wirt finally says, "No, actually, it's my fault, and I'm going to get you out." Because that was what the woodsman said the whole time in the first episode to Wirt, was he said, "You've got it backwards. You keep blaming him, but you're the older brother. You need to take responsibility."
Right. And
so you realize that that's why Wirt is in the unknown, is because he needs to grow up and he needs to take responsibility for his brother. He needs to be a man, sort of, and take responsibility. And Greg kind of weakly admits finally his secret, why he's in the unknown. And the reason he's in the unknown is because he actually stole the rock that he talked about from old lady Daniels. He actually stole the rock from her and was feeling guilty about it and needs to return it.
He's a stealer.
I'm a stealer, And so he kind of very weakly gives him back the rock, and he says, "You have to give it back now." And that's the point where he starts to give up. He passes out. He starts becoming this Edelwood tree, even more. So now you know why everyone is in the unknown at this point. Wirt's in there because he's not taking responsibility. Greg is in there because he's never given the frog a proper name, for one, and he's also never returned the rock and sort of assuaged his guilt a little bit. Beatrice is there because she threw the rock at the blue jay and has no way of becoming a person again. And then you learn the woodsman, why the woodsman was there.
Right.
Which I've been talking enough. You can jump in.
Well, no, I just like I said, the confrontation, bringing all those characters together, the woodsman, Beatrice, Greg, Wirt, and the beast, and you see you get to see the dynamic play out that probably happened for the woodsman, because the woodsman, the reason he's been carrying this lantern is because, well, he was told that he has to keep the soul of his daughter burning. Like, his daughter's soul is in the lantern, and if it goes out, then he loses her forever.
Yeah.
And so that's why he's been doing this, and the beast is, constantly, using that leverage against him to keep him working, or otherwise he kind of threatens, maybe you should give me the lantern. Let me take it, because at some point the woodsman took the lantern from the beast, fought him for it, and took it. And so it is the beast's lantern. That part is true, from the tavern lady. But here you see the dynamic play out where Wirt's seeing this, what's happening to his brother, and the beast steps in and says, maybe we should make a deal. I'll take your brother's soul, I'll put it in this lantern, you keep it lit,
you'll be the woodsman now,
and you'll carry the lantern, and his soul will keep burning. And then so it's like wait a second, the wheels start turning, and Wirt actually seems to be considering it. And then and I love how he figures it out pretty quickly and isn't fooled. It's like, that's dumb.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just going to wander around out here
He's
forever.
decisive for the first time in the whole series. Yeah.
And then he starts to figure it out, and he says, you're so obsessed about keeping this lantern lit. It's almost like your soul's in here. And the beast goes super wild.
Yeah.
Weird sounds, like the silhouette's like waving, almost like it's a candle that's blowing out a flame.
Oh, that's a good detail.
Candle, like a candle flame or something. And it's
the
like
light just gets like sucked out of the environment.
The light gets sucked, and he's like, do you want to see what true darkness is? So that Wirt's hit the nerve.
Yeah.
And he knows, and he's like, "Are you?" You know, I love that.
Are you? Like he has this cracky voice.
I love that detail. Yeah, that his voice cracks
he's
and then
nervous.
he says it again. Yeah. Are you?
Yeah.
But then he, rather than he realizes this is the woodsman has seen this whole thing. He knows what's going on here. This is his sort of battle to finish, and I need to go focus on my brother.
Right.
You know, that's his what his arc is.
Right.
You know, so Beatrice and Wirt free Greg, and that's when Beatrice finds out about the scissors.
Mm-hmm. So she can turn back into a person.
Yeah, and then the beast tries to like double down on the lies to the woodsman, but the woodsman blows out the lantern.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's like that brief moment too when the woodsman opens the lantern.
You can see something in it, you know.
You see something in it, but you see a flash of the beast.
Oh, that's right.
A little bit of light, and it's like Edelwood. It looks kind of like an Edelwood tree.
Yeah. Which
it kind of makes sense. It's like that's some form of immortality for this creature, I suppose, because you keep burning the Edelwood.
Yeah, so the people keep getting lost.
Yeah.
Which means that they keep becoming Edelwood trees, which means that the woodsman cuts them down and burns the lantern, which keeps the beast alive. Mm-hmm. And so he's got this very intricate system devised in the unknown where he keeps people wandering, lost, scared, whatever, so they fuel himself kind of in this vampiric way, sort of. And then I love the moment when the woodsman finally considers that it's worth losing his daughter forever to free them all and sort of
to break that chain.
Yeah, he has like this moment of hesitation, blows it out, and it's just all dark and peaceful. And you just hear Wirt say, "Goodbye, Beatrice," and she says, "Goodbye, Wirt. Bye, Greg." And then their character arcs start wrapping up. You know, it's really really well done. Yeah,
and they wake up in the real world,
and
I think they're taken to the hospital,
and the frog
is too.
Yeah.
This is like an interesting thing to me. Somehow this plays out because then you start questioning: was this all just in their heads? Was this taking place in some kind of space like between life and death where there was something really happening in a metaphysical way? You know, because they couldn't have been in the water for days.
Right.
At least not,
and it's only moments,
not in a physical like normal world rules kind of way.
Right.
If they somehow passed into the water and passed into some world or something like that, like going through the wardrobe where time passes differently in Narnia, you know. But yeah, they see the characters from episode 9, the real character Sarah's there, who Wirt is interested in, and he makes some decisive decisions there. But the frog gets shaken.
Yeah.
And its belly glows.
So he really did eat a real bell.
So he really did eat a real bell, and it's all real.
Oh, and then you have the whole sequence where the narrator says, you know, back over the garden wall, and you kind of go back into the sequence, and the woodsman sees his daughter again, and Beatrice and her family can kind of joke about their experience being bluebirds. You know, she's like, "Oh, eat your dirt," you know, like from the one episode, and like they're all over it. And,
right. And she's like, I'd be like, just like her, like, please don't joke about this.
Yeah. And the wolf from the beginning, that was just really the mutant dog, is her dog.
Yeah.
Like, and the house is the woodsman's house that they're in the very beginning.
Right.
You know, so it's like all these things just come full circle in the show, and like nothing is wasted. You know, it's neat.
The house at the beginning where the mill was?
Yeah. So if
where was she?
Where was
his daughter? Why wasn't she in the house?
Oh, no. So they're in a different the woodsman is sitting by himself in a different, like a cabin kind of thing. Right. When she comes out, sees him, and she's holding a candle. Which
right. I just didn't know where that house was. Was that ever
So I don't
seen?
think that was ever shown. But the mill that was in the first episode is Beatrice's family's home.
House. Okay.
And if you look at the decorations, like that Greg uses to knock out the woodsman in the first episode, they're all things that are inside their home.
They're all put back.
And they're all bird related too. There's like a little like statue of a bird and a little like branch, you know, kind of thing. And so everything there kind of comes full circle. And I love the last scene where you just see Greg put down the rock. He gives it back.
Right.
And so he's full circle. You know, everything. Yeah. His arc is
because I think that is that there is a short shot in the opening montage of the rock being taken.
Yeah, he picks up the rock in that opening montage.
So yeah, full circle. Yeah. So I love it so much. I love the to just think about what could be happening and what it could mean and things like that. What do you have any feelings about just how real what they were experiencing was, or in what sense was it real?
I think, you know, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said it's sort of a place between life and death, where everything that they're dealing with, everything that they need to know, who they need to be as people, is sort of expressed in this metaphysical, almost metaphorical way. And so I think everything was real. I think there were real people. I don't think they went through a portal to another place. I think that they basically died and went to this kind of purgatory, limbo kind of space where they have to sort of figure out if they're going to stay or not, I guess, you know, and if they stay, then they're dead. And if they aren't, then they go back, you know. That's kind of my thought. And I think there's just so many references to death throughout the series, with the skeletons and the pumpkins in the beginning, and the long black train, and the you know, the exposure to the elements of the cold and starvation and things like that. I think that's the most likely type thing you know they're doing. Kind of Dante's Inferno-ish, which there's a really good video essay on YouTube where somebody breaks down parallels between Over the Garden Wall and Dante's Inferno. So I think that's kind of the intention there, or at least approximating that, in my opinion. What do you think?
I mean, I think because it's clearly a shared experience, you know, it's not like it's all like Wirt's the only one who knows it. It seems like Greg's brings some experience back with him that correlates to what Wirt experienced. That it definitely has to be more than just a out of body death experience that's like an individual kind of something happening in Wirt's subconscious, right? You know, in a quick amount of time or something. So yeah, I guess I don't. I guess I would agree that I don't think it's a portal, because it's not a portal like where they physically went through a portal, because you don't ever see a connection between them being pulled out of the water into, or climbing out of the water into the unknown. Right. You know, they're just there, and then whenever their character arcs conclude in the unknown, they're just pulled out of they just come out of the water. Right. And so, yeah, I think I agree with you that it's like there's some kind of metaphysical place their spirits go or something, where, like you said, they're able,
which is shared, like
which is shared, which is shared not just with them two, but with other people as well.
They have their own inhabitants and things of people who have died before.
So it's just a way it's a way the story expresses the idea of spirits not being able to leave if they haven't, you know, moved on and haven't worked through things that they need to in this life, you know. So I think it's an interesting metaphor, you know, for transition and growing up, and taking responsibility, and also just not losing hope. Yeah.
It has all the mechanics of being this very classic fairy tale, folk tale, typological kind of story. You know, it's a coming of age story is ultimately what it is.
It has morals.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Like you would
Fable.
expect.
you know, and so I think that's why it reaches such a wide audience, and it's bigger now than it was when it first came out, from what I understand. And I think more and more people get to check in and experience it every year, and it's become almost a trend for some people, myself included, around the fall season that you watch it, just because it has that kind of the cozy fall atmosphere. And you know, there's parts of it that are moving and parts of it that are just absurd, you know, and ridiculous. And you know, it's not a perfect show by any means, where there's absolutely nothing to make fun of or nothing to sort of criticize, but it's really good.
What?
Yeah. Right. Well, so if I had to criticize one thing about it, I don't like the character design. I don't like the CalArts style. You know, like Gravity Falls or this show. I'm not a big fan of the character design that way, and I think it kind of pulls it out of the aesthetic that way. Yeah, I know, right.
I think that if it was more Gravity Falls, it's not. It's like there's a balance, because I've tried to find things that fit it.
Yeah.
Like I've tried to look and see, like, is there something else that fits this aesthetic? And I can't find anything that strikes the balance the way the show does. Like there's things like Gravity Falls is one that people will say, hey, if you like this, check out Gravity Falls.
Right.
But the art style just doesn't do it for me the same way Over the Garden Wall does. And then there's Adventure Time was a show that that the creator of this did for several seasons.
Actually, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Which is a lot. Which that show is a much different art style. You can see some similarities, but this is a lot more realistic and more attention.
Well, it's like the environment is in one style and the characters are in a different style, is almost what it seems like. The background of the show,
it's the unknown.
Well, right. It looks like a painting. You know, many of the episodes just straight up look like paintings. They have that peaceful kind of aesthetic, like what we were talking about, but the characters look a lot more cartoony and a lot more two-dimensional. And that's the only part that I'm just not a big fan of, that style. I wish that they would have a different style for the characters personally, but I think they do that as well.
But can you even imagine? I mean, can you even imagine?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right?
Like, it's like whenever you see a certain actor in a role, you just can't imagine that character without that actor. It's like that's kind of how it is for me. It's like I can't imagine Over the Garden Wall. In fact, there are Over the Garden Wall has some comics that continue the story. Some that are like prequels, like actually tell a little bit about Beatrice before.
Oh, neat.
Which would be cool to get a hold of if they were reasonably priced and easier to find. But there is like one that's actually a more realistic style of art.
Okay, interesting.
So it'd be interesting, if you were ever to look at that to see what you think. But when I look at it, I'm like,
it doesn't do the same thing.
It's not the same thing. I'm not going to be able to laugh at Greg's dialogue and his antics.
Fair. That's fair.
If he doesn't look
goofy,
like the Pillsbury Doughboy, proportionally,
that's fair.
So there's just something about...
That's a good point.
And like, I don't know, just the way I don't know if this goes to the character design as much as just animation, the medium, but like, I just love whenever Greg sees Sarah and Jason Funderburker, who we didn't get to bring up.
Yeah. His voice is the greatest thing.
But yeah, the greatest thing ever recorded.
Like, me? Sarah, are you ready to go?
Like, that's what you're afraid of.
Yeah.
Stealing your girlfriend.
Yeah.
But like when he sees them talking about, let's listen to it, and he's like, no. And like the way almost pulling his skin off.
Yeah.
In that scene.
That's true. You couldn't do that in another style. You're probably right.
Right. It's got to have that quality, I think, of...
And the show itself runs both tones. There's some of the episodes with the animals in school, or the really trippy dream sequence where it's just absurd and goofy, and you need that kind of cheesier art style. And then you have some that are a little bit more serious, and you have a depth to it as well. So really, I guess the art style does reflect the show. So I might have to stand corrected on that one. Yeah.
Might. Yeah. No, I cannot. This is like one of the few things I really can't. It's hard for me to critique it at all, because it's so unique.
Yeah.
But it's also so confident in what it is.
Yeah.
And it's something that I couldn't imagine or ask for, or it's just not something it's not something. Sometimes things come along that you're not looking for, you can't imagine, and you're like, how is it, this thing is so amazing, how does this exist?
Right.
And that's kind of how I feel about this show. It's hard for me to criticize it because you know, it's small.
Yeah.
Each episode is so short, so there's just so much detail and attention given in terms of the writing and the callbacks and into just very tight, you know, the humor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
no, it is very good.
It's weird because it also feels like it doesn't feel short. Like the episodes don't feel short. Yeah. But they also don't feel like boring or long. You know.
Yeah, they take exactly the time that they need to. Yeah. The pacing is really good.
Pacing is great. Pacing is really, really good. But yeah, so that wraps it up in the few words we spoke about it.
Yeah, just a few. Yeah. We probably talked about it longer than the show actually runs.
I think we were probably almost right on, or maybe slightly longer.
It's only like an hour and a half to watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what? It's 100
minutes.
100 minutes. A little over 100 minutes. Yeah. But yeah, so thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking about it.
Yeah.
And but we'll let you go. And as we say, this has been the Bridge of Two podcast. A far, far away bridge.